it keeps the elements out, and it's a basic integral part of your design. I'm talking about walls. My name is Zoltán. Today's webinar is all about walls. We are going to look at how do we create something like this from beginning to end. Let's take a look. As always, I'm joined by my colleague, Mr. Illespa.
Hi.
Who's our resident architect. When we talk about walls, it's actually a huge topic, so let's take a look at what we are actually going to talk about today.
Yeah, well, actually today is about the details of the wall, detailed commands that you perhaps didn't see before in other materials because there was no material about how you can create a structured wall with studs and things like that. And also we will cover how you can create styles of walls, how you can edit the layers, how you can actually create your own structure and save it into styles. And then if necessary, how you can set up connections between layers, even if it's necessary layer by layer. But of course, it always happens via rules, so the software will solve it for yourself, but sometimes when you need it, you can do it manually as well.
That's right. As always, we urge you to ask your questions in the chat bar, which is right next to me.
Yeah.
So all the questions that come in, we are going to look at it in detail in the end. So when we talk about walls, some of you might be already ARCHLine users, but we are going to talk about the details from the beginning in order to make you all understand what we have at hand. So let's look at the basics. So when we talk about walls, the most important thing is how they actually behave in buildings. And that's I think is a good starting point, because we need to inspect how the elements come together. Now, some of you might be familiar with a two-dimensional CAD or even three-dimensional one or even BIM. But let's brush up on this just quickly to see how this thing behaves.
Yeah, well, actually, I have created this simple model for better understanding how the wall connects to the other structures. Well, obviously, the wall will be the vertical structure, so that's not the question. The question here is that how the software automatically solves those sort of connections together with the roofs. We already have some material about that. And in this case, about the different slabs and floors and things like that. Now, the good thing in ARCHLine is that when you start using it, whatever you create, now we talk about walls, when you create the wall itself, the wall is automatically constrained to the proper floor structure part. That means when you draw it, obviously it starts from some sort of 0 point, some origin, and it elevates to a certain height that you have selected. If it's layer by layer, you can determine these lengths and heights layer by layer, which I will cover pretty soon. And when you change something in your designs, perhaps you change the structure of your floor, this can follow the changes. But for the reason to show you how this works, I actually disable this feature for these walls. So I will turn this feature on for one wall, or actually I think I will use it for a column as well, so you can see how it affects the changes in the 3D design.
Yes, let's see how that works.
Well, what we see here is a simple cross-section of a building with all sorts of basic details in it, and we have a ground floor and all the rest of the floors here. And whenever I change something in the ground floor, whenever I manage the floor of this structure, I can just open up the levels manager, and here I can set up the heights, the bottom elevations, and these are the constraints that I'm talking about, that you can set up level by level.
Actually, it's great that it's illustrated just below that. So the diagram that you see below has the legend, which shows you what sets up what. So the point here is that you can set things up to these levels, but it's not compulsory, right?
Yeah. If you don't want to deal with these, you don't have to deal with these. But when your project is complex enough that you want to deal with these, then you can just set them up or fine-tune them. The point is that they are there, even if you don't want to work with them. They are ready and they are doing what they have to do. Just like layers, whenever you draw something, it automatically falls on a default layer, even if you don't want to handle layers for some reason, because it's just a conceptual plan yet. But later, when you turn to a more complex phase of this design, it will automatically do its stuff, and it will work when you change these settings. So let's see how that works. Now that we see that we can manage how the levels are changing, let me just simply draw a new structure. I will start drawing a wall, and I will just simply select a simple wall structure. Let's say this is just a single wall like this here, pointing from this part to this part. Now let's see what sort of details of this wall have. We can see it here in the right hand side and in the 3D as well.
Updates in the 3D automatically.
Yes. Now what we can see when we select this wall, we will talk about these what we call markers as well later. But talking about the constraints and the geometry of this wall, it starts from a certain base elevation and it ends at a certain height, which I can manually tweak. I can just click here and type another value if I don't like what I see here. Or I can just go inside the settings and I can do the same thing here. Now the point here is that whatever I do with these settings, I always have the edit option instead of just directly typing a value there. Now this edit option gives me the same kind of figure here.
Yes.
And it tells me that I can actually constrain my top wall and the bottom of the wall to a top bound and a bottom bound, and this is how it works. I can say that, okay, the wall should always be constrained to the bottom of structure of the following floor, and that's why when I do the change that you will see now, I just go to the level manager and I change the ground floor's height. Perhaps I just elevate it with an extra ½ meter.
Yes.
And then when I say okay, this is following the changes. The rest are not following the changes.
Yes, so everything else is unlinked except for this wall.
Because I intentionally kind of broke this connection. I just wanted to show you what's the difference between the default ARCHLine structures and what's the difference between a classic non-living wall structures that you would find in other design ecosystems sometimes. So this is the point here, that when you draw new items in ARCHLine, you will end up with living items that are constrained to other parts. But of course, if you want, then you can detach them, and then that happens this way. You just go into the properties, and instead of just simply using a constraint, you say that it's on set. So it's whatever I type that should be fixed. It's not living with the changes.
What about, we are going to show this later, but what happens if you have multiple layers? You can set the layers individually to these levels.
Yes,
right?
but just as it's happening here in a real structure, you will need to sometimes say that a certain level, I mean a certain layer of the wall, like an external layer of a brick cavity or something like that, it's just overhanging the main structure because it's just covering the edge of the slab or something like that. So you can actually set that up with these values.
Now that we have seen the theory, let's look at how we actually create the walls. I think we have an empty project for that because we are now going to do something from scratch. Again, this might be familiar to some of you, but let's just brush up on this. So let's look at the representation and basic properties of walls.
Yeah.
So how do we work with them?
So about the representation and the basic properties of the walls, we will create a very simple drawing. I have a guide for myself here. This is what I will use. You can start from scratch. Whatever you do, it happens the same way. You start the wall tool, that's how you design a wall, and then you will see a list of styles built in the software right after you installed it. Of course, you can extend this list. This is when we will talk about the wall styles. But right away, the software will start with the default wall. And then when you say that, okay, I have a design here that I would like to follow, you just pick the first point and then you move your mouse to the desired direction, and you can tell the software that actually on my drawing I can see 3.6, that's in meters. So I just type 3.6 and I say, okay, that should be 3.6 in length. And then the software continuously allows me to draft and create new and new walls. Let me just create
just
the drawing
do it, and meanwhile I'll tell the viewers what we actually see. So what Ilyich is demonstrating now is basic CAD tools. You see these greenish guidelines which actually help you to align either to a preset value or to 45 degrees, 90 degrees orthogonally. So this might be familiar to you who already work in CAD. This is a kind of a visual or drawing aid. Just like now, if you want to make sure that this node is on level with the one on the top, so just above it, we can just hold the shift key and move the mouse key until we find the desired position. So we can snap it to another point if we want, just like that. So that way we can just carry on. You see that the blue line that he's sketching is actually the reference line. That's one thing that he did is that he started drawing the wall and then he flipped the wall with the keys right in the top right corner. You can also use the F5 key to actually toggle between the positions. This is very important because you always have one line where all the measurements are made and you have the wall added in addition to it. Now, one thing that you mentioned that you're working in meters, obviously you can change that later on, and there's one other very important thing. You don't need to just add the values as they are. You can either add up tinier parts of the same values. So if you don't know the exact measurements and if you have a survey plan like this in front of me, you can just type in the numbers with a plus sign. You can add factors and you can add modifiers to add the value. Now, just like here, the way we can connect these two is that we just hover the mouse key to the point where we actually want to go to, and that gives us the green guidelines.
Yeah.
And then
I can just snap to it. It's like I would create a literal line which I align my drawing to, but I don't have to draw that line. I just say my intention by just hovering my mouse over there. And whenever I close this loop, it will automatically create all the right connections to the walls, and it's also automatically creating the 3D of the model. So when you create the drawing, you do not create the drawing, you create the building itself, and it automatically has these separate representations, which we talk about when we say it's a section, it's an elevation, it's any sort of part of this building.
If you could just select one of the walls for a moment, and let's look at the markers, because you promised that we are going to discuss them as well. So you see that the wall has two faces, one solid line and one dashed.
Yeah.
What's the difference?
The difference between those two is that if you remember how I drafted this whole layout, I used the external counter, and that's the reference line. And now the software remembers that was the reference line. So whenever I change the thickness of the wall, let's say, okay, this should be, I don't know, 0.5 instead of 0.38, then that's the line that keeps its position. You can actually go even beyond that. You can set up the core level and the core layer and so on. But by default, this is how it works. You can say that, okay, this is the line that stuck there because I have created it this way. You can change it later. There is a command to switch the reference line later. But by default, the software understands that obviously your intention was to create this external contour, so I should keep that.
Yes.
Now, talking about the selection, what's the difference between this and this? So that was the reference line, and the rest is just the other side. But there, as you can see, if you hover your mouse over these, it changes for some reason. That always means that you have some sort of interaction with that item. Now, all the markers is what we can see here is the rotation, the endpoint, movement, the edge, the other edge, and the length. Mm-hmm. Now, if I would like to change the length of this wall, I can just click here and type the length. Or I can just click here and I can say, okay, change length. The difference between the two is that one time I see the value and I can change the value itself. And if I do this here and I move my mouse and I type, I don't know, 1 meter, this will not be a 1 meter long wall. It will change its length with, it's a relative change. But the other one was a direct change. So if I would do this here, it will be 1 meter long. And the reason why it kept this point here instead of this point at the end is the direction of the arrow. Mm-hmm. This tells you what will be the change of length, or what will be the direction of the change of the length.
Can you flip it?
Yeah, you can do that. If you just click here and now I type 0.3, then this is how you can change it.
I see.
Now, talking about the wall structure, let me just undo these. I just use the undo, Ctrl-Z on the keyboard. You can also rotate the wall. You can click here and you have all the options. You can move the wall, and whenever you click on the edges, you will see edge commands. Now, if you click here, you see a sort of list of edge commands, and if you click here, you see the same, because on both sides you can break apart. You can break the wall apart into two new walls. If, for example, for any reason I would like to make this shape here, when I click here, the software breaks the wall into two new walls. And sometimes that happens that you need to change the design for any sort of design purposes. But when we create something, I have actually one thing that I can see that it's an interesting thing, and I did not cover that. When you would like to create a wall in a certain angle, like for example, the question here is if you would like to create a wall with a certain length or in a certain degree, how you can do that. So if you draw a wall and you start it from anywhere, you can start from an existing point or from somewhere else, then as you can see at the right hand side, now we can see this little field with length and inclination. If you would like to fix the length or you would like to fix the inclination, you can just hit the tabulator key on your keyboard, and then the software jumps into the first value. So if now I would like to fix the length, I know that my wall should be 3 meters long. I just type that and I hit enter, and now when I move my mouse, the length is fixed. So I can refer to a certain direction, and I can be sure that this will be with a certain length.
So by hitting tab again, you can go to the inclination, and then you can add the desired
I can
value.
say that, okay, this should be 42 degrees, and in that case, this is fixed. And then now I can tell that, okay, in 42 degrees, I would like to create a wall with a length of 2.5, for example, and now I will have a wall with a length of 2.5 in the direction of 42 degrees.
Perfect.
The software by default, this is something that you can change. The software by default understands the horizontal right as the 0, and it's counterclockwise.
I see. I was about to ask you that where the reference point is.
Yeah.
Now, going back to the markers, are there any differences between the 2-dimensional and 3-dimensional markers? What I mean is that if you click on a wall in 3D, you see markers as well, but what the differences are there?
And the differences here is that most of them are quite similar, just as you told. You will see the rotation, you will see the length, you can see the arrow, you can see both sides, you can break it apart, and this is quite similar. But we will see this 3-axis marker here, which allows you to transform your wall, change the elevation, move it, elevate it to a different location. And also, if you would like to, you can change the height. If you click on the top corners or the bottom corners of this wall, you can say, okay, I would like to change its height for any sort of reason. And the same thing I would like to do with this one, so I can change it freely. And of course, just as in case of the 2D, you can move your mouse, say that, okay, this should be, I don't know, taller, and then you type the value. And this is how you change the height of the wall to a certain level or to a certain location. So that's the only difference. Other than that, which is coming from the 2D, the differences of the 2D and the 3D. Other than that, the markers work just as the same as in the 2D.
I think it's time to add the partition walls, maybe.
Yeah, and before we do that, just one thing that I just remember that we should cover is that when you select a wall, now you remember we talked about that you can break apart the wall. But there is one more thing which we will cover in detail later, but I think it's worth mentioning here that you can
changing thickness.
When you see this component mode, this is what I'm talking about. You select an item and you see this icon. This means if you click on it, something else will happen. Now I can still see the corners of this wall and I can see the sides, but none of them is solid. Both is dashed. And now if I click here and I select the same, actually we can see that the list is different, but if I click here and I say insert node and I kind of try to break it apart, I will not break it apart, but instead of that I will change the wall shape from the top of the view, which we will cover a little bit later in more detail, but this is also part of this marker topic. So what was the thing that
partition walls? Let's add them. It's I'm especially interested in that because you would usually go ahead and change the wall thickness and draw it that way, but it's a perfect time to demonstrate how the styles work. So.
Yeah. You're talking about these. Now I have a wall with a certain thickness, so now I select another one with a different thickness, and then I click here. And if now the orange line would be at the wrong location, I would again use this or the F5 key to change the orientation of the wall thickness. And I think now I'm happy with this one, so I just refer to the other part, and then I go and select the 10 millimeter wide, 100 millimeter wide wall, and I just quickly start drafting whatever I want. And now I need to flip the wall reference line, so I just hit F5 twice, and I just click here.
One thing to add that when you terminate the wall command, you just right-click.
Yeah,
So that's
it's important, and you don't have to completely skip the wall command and start it again by using the escape key. But now when you start it and you hit the right button, just as you mentioned, you are still in the command but at the starting point of the command. So now I again use these green lines, so I just refer to this point, so they appear, and that's it. And then now I refer to this non-existing intersection, and then I move my mouse towards the right. I don't know, I just type the value or just say, okay, it should be some place here, and then there should be something here. But actually here I know the distance between the two walls.
Yes.
So there are two ways. One thing is the kind of conceptual way, when you just draft the walls and you just say that what you are interested in is the aspect ratio of the whole thing, the kind of size, but you are not interested in perfect values. In that case, you just draft and change the distance later. I will cover that soon. But if you already know that this distance should be 1.1, then now is the perfect time. I can introduce this command here,
yes.
And that's the reference point, insert reference point. So I just click here, and I say, okay, now my reference point from where I would like to measure the starting point of my wall is here.
In that corner, right?
So I just click there. Nothing happens. I mean, nothing visual happens. But from now, if I move my mouse up and I type 1.1, and I say, okay, that's the value, enter, then now the software understood that it should be measured from that point that I specified earlier.
But be aware, because now the wall is added to that line, south of this line, right?
Yeah. So now I need to flip it, F5, and I flip it over, and then now I can just do it like this way, and now I have this corner here.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so now we have this part, but what's next in terms of sketching? There's a couple of things I want you to show, including offsetting walls from one another.
Yeah, well, if you know the distance between these two walls, for example, let's say I know it's 1.9 here, or I know the location of this here. Let's say, let's go with this one. I just would like to change the location of this wall, so I say I would like to move it. But this is not an easy thing if I just click on it, because I'm picking it with the wrong side. So I just click here, I select move because that's what I want, but I use move from, and then I click here, and then now I moved it properly to the proper place. Now if I know the distance between these two, I can select the first one and then control click on the second one, and this tells me the current distance between this point and this point, and if I'm happy with that, I just keep it. But if I just would like to change it, again, just as in case of the length of the wall, I just type the new value. It's actually 0.9 perfectly, and then now the second wall changed its position, because
and it's important that the connection is kept.
Yeah.
So everything moves. You can flip the direction of this arrow, right?
Yeah. Again, just as in case of the wall, you can just flip this inertia system, and then you can just say that, okay, this is the one that keeps its position, and the other should change its location.
So that's how you offset one wall to the other.
Yeah.
What about connections? So how do you connect walls? Now we are in a very fortunate situation when everything is connected automatically. So it wasn't that difficult for the program to do it. But there are scenarios where you want to connect walls manually. How does that work? And what do we have to do?
Let's create a situation intentionally like that. If I have a wall like this here and it's not connected to the rest, but I would like to connect this here, I have at least two options I always have. One is the T-shape connection, and the T-shape connection, and the other one is the L-shape connection. The difference between the two is how the software handles the modification of the two different walls. I mean, when I go with this, or this is the T and the L connection. When I go with this and I say, okay, T-connect this, click, and into this, then it solves itself.
Yes.
Because the first clicked item will change its length to match the other item.
So it extends into the other thing.
If I do the other way around and I say, okay, T-connect this into this, something else will happen. The length of this wall changed, but it cannot ever meet with the second wall without modifying it. But that's the point here. The T connection modifies only the first wall and not the second. It just modifies the length and tries to match the walls, but if it's not matching, then it's just changing the length. So this is where you can use a T connection, and when you use an L connection, that will always change the length of both. So if you click here and you say you would like to connect it with that one, it will break apart this connection and it will change the length of this one. And actually in this case the same thing happens if you do it the other way around. So if you click here first and on the other one, the exact same thing happens because the software changes the length of both to match each other.
I see. Now we are going to return to this connection matter in a second when it will be more spectacular when we talk about multi-layered walls.
Yeah.
So how do they differ from what we have sketched so far? Because this is a conceptual stage.
Yeah.
But let's say that we want to go one step further. We want to substitute these walls with multi-layered ones. How do we create them?
Yeah, and I think this is a part when we can dig deeper also into the settings of the wall. We just covered a few basics, but when you would like to create a multi-layered wall, or you would like to work with the multi-layered wall, it's worth noting that you can select an item and you can go to the properties and visualize the properties dialog. And then here you will find not just the basic settings, the materials and sort of location and things like that, but also the edit compound walls command, which allows you to add more and more and more layers, and the software will continuously keep tracking of those changes. And then you can set up the function, the material, the thickness, the base offset, and so on. So how this works? Now, first things first, the function. The function of the wall layer can be something nominal. I mean, it should be a core layer, which is very important, or a cavity, or just numbers, which allows you to kind of set up an order between the layers that, for example, this layer is more important than the other one. The higher the number, the most important that layer is. This comes interesting when you connect multi-layered walls, which I will show pretty soon. The other one, the material will appear when you intersect the wall. So that's why it's important when you make a spectacular 3D cut of the building, that will be the material that you see inside on the render, for example. There's the thickness. The thickness is just, the thickness of the layer. It's very simple. And there's the base offset.
That's actually what you showed in the beginning, is that you can tie this layer to the top of the structure, so the slab just below it.
Yeah, so you can, again, here you have the option to edit it, and you can say that, okay, let's just bound this not to the top of the structure, but to the finished floor for any reason, and then say, okay, this is what I want, and in that case, I would like to use the same value, so I can just click here, and I can say, okay, edit, and do the same thing, but a good thing here is that actually these are texts, so you can just Control Copy, and Control Paste, Control V, and you just type it, and the software will understand. You don't have to go into the settings. And the same thing happens here with the heights. So you can say, okay, this height is constrained to the bottom of the structure of the following floor. +1 means it's the following floor. And you can also even set up an offset for any reason you might need it. And then when you say okay, then you can do the same to the rest of the layers as well.
Fill pattern?
The fill pattern is actually the pattern that you can see here.
So the hatching of the...
Yeah, so if I don't like this, I can actually turn off the hatch, if for example this is a cavity or something like that, or I can just say that I would like to edit the hatch and I would like to add a completely different style or a completely different pattern. This is what comes up. You can completely set up the orientation, the look and feel and the colors and everything else for this pattern, and this is how you detail the structure itself. You can also name it. This comes handy when you make listings of walls, because the software will not just list the geometrical properties, but also the names of the layers, and this helps when it's not just sometimes the fill pattern or the material is not just that talkative. You don't understand. Okay, there are 2 brick layers, but which one is the?
You need to identify them somehow.
Yeah, so you can name them properly, and there is a layer ending which can be set up using with different line types and so on, and there's the visibility. So for example, if this is an air cavity, you can turn off the visibility, or instead of that, sometimes we just simply use the visibility, because in intersection sometimes we would like to see some hatch of the air cavity as well. So I turn on the visibility, but I use we have a material called air, which is a visible material, but it's completely see-through, so you can use it just as well. You turn off the layer visibility. So to talk about something like this, let me just create a new style, because that's where we started from. So I have created this, and I say, okay, I add one new layer.
And that is going to be a
and
render, maybe?
Yeah, let's say this is just a very thin layer. It's only 1 centimeter, and it's with a different material. It's with the same base offset, the same height, but it's very thin, and it has the name. What was that?
Render.
Render. Let's say it's render, and that's the brick wall.
So now you would want to use this later in other situations, right?
Yeah. So let's say this is what I want, and it's a total thickness of 11 centimeters. Say, okay, that's it. Okay, go with it. And then now this is just a version of the original 10 centimeter wide wall. It's not saved. Next time when I open the project, I cannot select it like a named structure.
So how would you handle this?
That's how you do it. You click here. That's the styles list. And here at the styles, you can add new styles to the installed one. So you can say, okay, it's a new style, and it's a one. Well, actually, it's a 2-layered 11 wide wall. Let's say, okay, this is the one here. Okay, that's it. You can set up a folder to further structure it. These are folders: the composite, the framed construction, and you can also set up a subfolder if you would like to further detail it. But now I just skip it and I say okay, and now it appears at the bottom of the list, and I can say okay. From this point on, I can just start drawing a wall, and I can select this here, and I can work with that easily.
So that means that although ARCHLine is supplied with a list of styles, but in every country the regulations are different, so you can create your own styles. But this is something that you can either use locally on this particular project, or you can make it into a global user folder, the style. So you can make it available for other projects, and also you can carry from one computer to the other. So whenever you update your license or you update your computer, you can just take all the styles and take them with you.
Yes. Talking about these styles now, if I would like to apply this style in new projects, if I would like to save this style out of this project, or if I would like to share this style, I can do all those. When I start a command and the styles appear here, I can right click on a style and I can do any sort of thing that I would like to. Activate means I would like to work with it, so that's like just picking the style. I can set up the properties, I can also change its location, I can rename it, I can erase it, I can export it so I can share it with you, I can copy it to a server and then you can import it to your project. And I can also move to a package which is called my package, my style package. Now my style package is a package that is visible all across your projects. So if you do not do that, this style will only alive in this certain project.
Yes.
It won't automatically visible in all the rest of the projects. That will be a bit would be a bit confusing. But if you would like to, then you can just move it to this package style, which is called my. And then when you open up a new project, you will see this style that you have just created. So you can decide whether this is just a locally used style or it's a global style that you would like to use in the rest of the projects.
It's great. How do we actually replace one style with the other?
Yeah, that's it here. Let me just erase these because from this point on we don't need these. Let's say, okay, this was a conceptual drawing, but now I would like to take a step further and I would like to use one of my existing multi-layer styles to exchange the existing walls to those. By default, it's very simple. You just select the wall and you say, okay, it's not a one-layered wide wall already, but it should be something else, for example, this with rendering on it. So this is how you change it. But let me just undo that. If I would like to be even more sophisticated in selection, then I can just select this and control click on the rest and so on. But again, if it's a long process, then I would not like to do that. So in that case, I use the selection, but actually it's in two separate locations in the software. You can remember whichever you remember, you are already there. This here is the selection menu here. And there is another one, and it's at the end of the edit. This is select. It's easy to find. You can actually type select here and you will find all these commands. So you say, okay, now I would like to select items by their properties because I know that this is, by properties, this is a wall with
they all have the same
specific
thickness,
wall width, which was, I think now in meters, so let's say 0.38. And okay, so now the software selects all of them. And then now I can do the same thing. So I can just say, okay, this from this point on is something else. Like say, this is a brick covered wall with cavity on it. And then the software changes the layout. And again, it will keep the reference line. If you don't like that, you can change that, but actually that's how it works. It will keep the reference line that you used when you created it.
There's still a couple of things to explain regarding multi-layer. So if you don't mind, let's return to the multi-layered wall topic, and let's talk about a few things what we already discussed for the single layered. I mean connections, TNL connections. How do they differ in this scenario?
Okay, talking about this here, let me just create a clean cut situation in a separate location. And I will use this here. And I would like to show you another thing. If you don't remember what was the name of this style, you just select it and you will see it.
I see.
But if you don't want to even know about it, you can just click here and you can right click and say create similar. This is also something that is working very well.
It's like picking the style from the palette.
You just pick it and then you just draw something. Like this. Let's say it's happening right like this way.
So you want to connect these two walls together, but what determines which layer goes into what?
Now, let's just use a T connection, because that's when the order of layers will come handy. Now, if I connect it, nothing fancy happens. The core layer connects, but the rest is not connecting.
Yes.
And the secret behind this is what we talked about earlier. This here, the function. Now these two here, the very thin layers, they're in a very low priority function. So they will not ever meet each other in the 2D and 3D space, except when I say so. But there is a command to directly connect them. I will show you that. And if I elevate their function, their importance via a number. Now I need to do that, of course, in case of the both of the walls. So this works best if you set up the importance in the setting level. So let's see how that works. If I would like the outer core, the outer layer, to be more important than the inner layer, then I just select a value that is higher than 5. So let's say, okay, it's 6, and say okay, and let's just break this apart because I will need to reconnect them. And I do the same thing here. Now, again, I could just create a copy of this setting.
Well, yes, you could.
And then
you could just
I
create
just
a similar one.
inherit that, but now I just do it.
Let's just repeat
manually.
to understand.
So, okay, this was it. I just change it to 6. So now both walls have this layer as an importance of 6, more important than the rest of the here.
So if you
T-connect
them?
T-connect them, and see now it goes, it's cutting through everything, and it goes through to match the other one.
So what you're saying is that if you want two layers to meet, you have to give the same function to them.
Yeah, the same, at least.
And something which is higher than the layers they have to cross.
Yeah, it will cross the other one if it comes to a situation like this. But now there was another situation when it was just as in the same level. I think it was this here, when I did not change anything, but sometimes there is a situation when this works fine in most of the situations, but this specific situation is different, so I need to connect this to this. Now, we can refer to the markers again a little bit. You remember we talked about that there was this item
here. Yes,
the
component mode.
The component. Right. Now, in case of a multi-layered wall, we have, in this case, we have 3 components. The first is the first layer, and then I can just jump to the next layer, jump to the next layer. This drives us to a topic which we will cover soon again with the borders. But now what I would like to is just to switch the proper layer, which I would like to connect to the other one. And then now I click on the edge, the endpoint, and I say, okay, connect the covering layers or connect the core layers. Now whichever I select, in this case, the software understands that I'm picking this here, and I say, okay, let's just connect this to this one, and then it will connect it automatically.
So it does it for you. You don't have to go back to the settings if you want to just connect this particular situation.
Yes. So what I would like to say here, that you will have the fast and efficient work always if you set up the rules properly, but sometimes you cannot set up a rule which is perfect for 2 different scenarios, and in that case you can set up a rule which is general for the rest of your project and then handle manually some parts that are not fitting the rules. So you don't have to change the rules over and over and over again. You just do, okay, say let's connect these two together.
Can you just show us that when you are in the component mode, how you can change the outline, the contour of the wall layers one by one? Because that's something that we did before with the single layer wall, but this is something that behaves differently here.
Yeah. So if I'm jumping to any of those layers, let's say I'm just changing the cavity here. I can click on the edge. If I do it the other way around here, I can do the same thing. I can insert a node. I can even add the polyline. That's the difference between the two, is that here I can just break it apart, and node by node I can set up something like this. But if I do the same thing around here, add the polyline, I can do
you can
a
draw
similar
an
shape.
maybe.
I just draw a complex shape, and when I hit enter, then the software will change that. So this way I can change, I can set up a kind of a jump out bump in a wall because it was created late in the previous century or something like that. So it's not with the same thickness or something.
That's right.
Like that.
There's actually quite a few tips we want to show you, but for that we need to load up another project maybe. So if there's nothing else to show here, let's move to the next project and let's see how the wall layers behave in that one.
Okay. Which project do you want me to
when we can
load?
show the firewall.
Okay,
like
the
that.
firewall.
So and also one other thing, the individual shaping of the wall layers. That's another thing that we have to show. Maybe it's two different projects.
Yeah, that's two different projects. I will show you first how you can create a firewall. Now, a firewall. Now, basically, we already have something about this. When you have a wall structure meeting a roof, it will automatically cut itself if you use the proper settings. But in case of a firewall, it's not covered by a roof. It's actually running in front of the roof. So you cannot set up a rule that tells the software that, okay, this should be cut, but not with this height, but with another one. So it would be too complex. So instead of that, the software gives you this smart idea of profiling the walls, the kind of same way as well. Yeah, as kind of same way as you when you change the shape of the layers.
That's right.
As we did before. What did you
no,
say?
just I was about to say that when you change the shape of the layers, you can do it for the walls as well. You can do it from certain angles. But what I really want to see here is that what happens if you could zoom into that part of the building and see something interesting. During our webinar on roofs, we showed how you can put a roof on top of a wall, and the roof is going to cut the walls. Like you just said, but there are some scenarios when you want to extend walls upwards, but because they are T-connected, they're not going to be good enough. Now, in this situation, this is actually maybe you can demonstrate it here. If you extend this wall up here, although it's not that realistic.
Let's just change its height. It's like, oh well, I used the wrong value, but let's say I would like to change the length of a wall, and this is actually it's answering a question. That we had an earlier question how you can offset a wall with a certain value. This happens the same way. You just pick something and you move it. You tell the intention where you would like to relocate it, even if it's height or the position of the wall. You just elevate it, and then you tell the value. You don't have to click anywhere. You just tell it's higher, it's taller, and then you type, for example, 1, because now we are working in meters, and then now it's 1 meter taller.
But here's the problem. You see that it's actually a diagonally cut
it's
wall.
quite unnatural, and that's it's unnatural, but that's the basic connection between the walls. It's they are equal. But if I would like to make one of them more important than the rest, then that's how I do it. I just T-connect them. And so let's find this. There is a command actually to show on the floor plan, so we can see, okay, that's the wall we are talking about, and perhaps this is the other one. So I'm just zooming in, and I say, okay, they are already L-connected, but let's just change it. Let's just make this wall less important than the other one, so let's just T-connect this to this. And see the importance change. Now this is less strong than the other one. It's just bumping into the other one. And now if I do the same, I just elevate I just change its height. So I click on the edge here and I change its height, and I just do the same thing, move it up above and type 1, and I say enter. Now the connection looks cool. Just as the same here.
Yeah, so this is actually the scenario what you can do if you want to have a wall piece that extends over the roof.
Yeah.
Do you want to keep on talking about the firewalls, or?
Yeah, let's just finish this topic, because the firewall is a specific wall that you would like to sometimes draft yourself. You just would like to change the shape of this wall. By default, the wall shape is defined by its length and its height. But when I select this, let's just use the same command again. I right click here and I say, okay, show on floor plan. This is the one here. Let's just enlarge that. So this is the wall. If we are looking at from in the 3D, we are looking from the top direction actually. Now if I click on one of the sides of the wall, it's important that, as you can see, there is a dashed line telling me which side I was clicking on. And if I knew that that I would like to change this side, then I'm correct. And in that case, I go here and I say, okay, change the profile and add the whole frontal profile to this originally rectangular shape. And then let's just change it in a way it looks like this. And then
so
now
you redraw how it should look like from the side.
And again, here again, you can use values. You can type values if you measured it from your model. You can actually use the projection of the elevation as a drawing behind this, and you can draft it that way. But the point here is that from this point on, the software changed the height of this wall.
I see.
I mean, they changed the shape of this wall in a way that I have designed it. The software will always keep the part within the closed loop that I have created, within the contour.
There's actually two other scenarios I want to show regarding the profiling. One is that how you can profile individual wall layers.
Yep.
But maybe before that, you want to show us how you can profile the walls that are actually supporting terrain.
Okay.
Maybe you have the same file for that.
Yeah, actually, this project that I'm loading now is a later stage of this building. Already having this firewall here. It's appearing right up here. So that's it.
Yeah, so that's what we have just been working on.
And we have a supportive wall here. There's actually a terrain, a large terrain here, and it's supporting that from breaking into the rooms. And actually, this have several layers as well. So answering the first question, your first question was how you can set up a supporting wall against the terrain.
Maybe it's a bit slanted, or maybe it's not.
Sometimes it's not just a regular wall with a vertical shape, but sometimes it's slanted, or it has a different it has a changing width when we see from the cross section. So let me just show you with a simple example here. Here I will create a simple wall with one single layer, so the layers won't confuse us. And just say, okay, this should be, again, a very simple wall from here to here. That's appearing just actually
behind it.
Yeah, it's here. It's here. So how can I do that? First things first, if I click on it and I go to the settings, I can say, okay, this wall is having an angle, which is here, a slant angle. Now, this angle is 90 degrees means, again, it's measured from the floor. It's 90 degrees. If I change it to, I don't know, 80, then it will be like
see
that.
in 3D that it's slanted now.
So I just undo and redo, so you will see the changes here at the right-hand side. So this is what happens.
Okay, what if one side is slanted and the other one is vertical?
Well, in that case, I just design the vertical wall, and then I click on the wall itself. I click here, and at the edge here, I say, okay, this should be something with a profile, but in this case, I should change the section profile. Now, the section profile looks pretty similar to the other one, just it's, the different shape. And then you say that this is something like this here. So when I close it, the software will create it, and you will see this is how it looks like. So it was this before, and now it's this after that.
Maybe this is the good stage when we can actually explain other things regarding when structural elements, maybe walls and columns, meet. So how do we go about, let's say, when we create a chimney I see on the top?
Yeah.
So what are the things that we have to keep an eye on?
Yeah. Well, for example, let's say you talked about the chimney. So let's say this chimney is starting from this level. In this case, perhaps not, but let's say it's starting from this level. Now you have two options to do that. One thing is, which is the obvious way when the chimney is made out of brick, is that you actually draw the chimney. In that case, it will be part of the walls. In that case, it will be part of the walls, and it solves itself naturally. But if it's something else, you can use the objects. We actually do have a few chimneys. So I just search for a chimney object here, and these are parametrical objects. You can say that, okay, you would like to use this chimney, and this should be with these sort of values, with a certain height, and so on. And then you just pick it up and you just move it around, and you say, okay, this should fall into this wall, into this specific location. Now, by default, the chimneys are, the objects, because this is actually an object. If I select it, I can tell that that's an object. objects are not interfering with the walls. That's not their natural behavior. But if it's something that should interfere with the wall, it should take out of a wall part.
Yes.
In that case, I can instruct the object. Okay, I can say that okay, this object should be inserted into the wall, and in that case, it solves the volume of the wall automatically.
So your calculations will be much more accurate.
Yeah, they are accurate now because this space is not occupied by a wall and the chimney as well, but it's only occupied by the chimney object itself. So, and the same way I do this, I can do the same thing with columns. But columns are a bit different because they are mostly structural supportive items. So when I select a circular column, or let's just go with another one, I think a rectangular will be much better. So if I select it and I just place it here, see it automatically
they cut their place in it.
Is inserted into the wall because that's the by default behavior of that sort of item.
What happens if you have changing wall thickness? We briefly touched upon this before, but you said that you can break up a wall to smaller segments.
Yeah.
So what you can do is that you can take the middle part and you can extend it outwards.
Yeah.
That's actually a good one thing you could do is that you can insert a polygon, and that way you can draw how the wall thickness changes, or you can break up the wall to smaller segments and then you can just
let's just show you an example which could be something like this here. I have a main wall and then I would like to make an extension for any sort of decorative purposes or so. So I click here and I say that I would like to change the components and I would like to change the one side of this wall. I click here and I say add the polyline. And I just, type the distance. When I'm working in centimeters, so I should take care of the values that I'm typing. This should be 100 centimeters and like that. And then I'm done. So it's extended.
Shows it
one solution to this question. Another solution is that you can actually add another wall here and then make changes on that. In that case, it's very simple. You just say that this wall is a 10mm wide wall which is lying in front of the other one. That just again take care how you draw it, because if it falls into the other one, you will confuse the connections. And so yeah, you just hit F5, and now it's there. So the software creates this wall structure there. And if you would like to change the visual clues of this wall, then you can do that in a way that appears here. And then again, this is a wall that you can just cut the contour of it. You can insert certain objects in it. You can even create a bevel. When the wall thickness is thinner than the rest. And for this purpose, I would like to show one specific thing because that's actually a window property, but changes the wall shape.
Yes. Also, we have the niche tool. I'm not sure if
the niche.
It's
The niche. That's the one that I would like to show you. Let's say I think I have a nice window here. This here. Let's just build up the 3D of this model. Say, this is it here. And now I'm going to the details of this window, and I'm saying there is some sort of setting here which is called the niche, and there's a depth for it. And if I change its depth, and I say okay, and now the software added a niche below. So it's actually a window property, but it will change the shape of the wall.
That's right. And the same thing goes with the wall recess, which is under the edit tool. With the walls, you can add the wall recess, which just makes a thinner part.
Sorry, the difference between the wall recess and this one is the wall recess is kind of behaving like a window, so you can just move it and place it, and then you can change the parameters, the shapes, and things like that. So it's living on its own.
That's right. So let's look at another topic that we have here, and that's something that we have never touched before, and that is stud framed walls. So that's something that which is being asked for us quite some time now, that we produce some materials to that. So now is the time to actually look at how this works. Now, like we said before, everything in ARCHLine exists as a style. Having said that, we do have a style for stud framed walls. Obviously, you are encouraged to make your own, because in every country the regulations are different and you might use different materials, but we have one to get you started, and that would help us to explain the basics. So what do we see here?
Yeah, so now talking about this, I already created one wall with the basic Timber 200 setting, and now what I'm about to say is that when you draw these things, again, these sort of structures, they have their own specific connection when we talk about corners, and the software automatically solves that. based on the settings that you have within the wall. Now, to be able to talk about the details inside this structure, let me show you one more thing. I will add a window. The same thing would happen if I add the door. See, now I can have a window that is falling into the frame system.
Yes.
That is
So
usually essential most of the time, but sometimes you cannot do that, and the software will also automatically solve that. So let's say this window must fall here when it intersects everything and it's cutting through all the studs and things like that. In that case, the software will auto solve this situation, not only in the 2D level, but also in the 3D. Let's just go here and see and say what we talk about. If I select it, I already see the close of the structure within. But let's talk about how you can set something like that up. It's here in the wall framing. And in the wall framing, you can tell what sort of items you would like to enable and with what sort of values. Now, let's just start at the top. The floor plate, and actually you can always see here, it's selected. The floor plate is this one. You can select a certain cross section. We are talking about timber frame structure now, but as you can see, the software allows you to select different cross sections. This could be a steel profile. This could be, I don't know, a certain style from a maker. If you draw that cross section and you bring it in, you can use that, and you can change the material as well, because that's here. You can change what sort of material you would like to see. So you can change the shape, you can enable and disable its visibility. And there is one interesting thing, which is, I think it's interesting when we talk about visible stud structure. It's like the Fachwerk in Germany, when you see the studs coming out of the wall, and there are the bricks within, and with this offset you can just shift.
You can make sure that
it
shifts outside. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. So there is the top plate. There is the counterpart, which is the floor plate, and there is the top plate. You can always double them. Take care that there is an option here which allows you to double, triple, or multiple these items if you need. If you don't, you just erase the ones that you don't want. There are the wall studs. These are at the end. There is the left and the right side. You can have different settings. There are the inner studs, and these come with a little bit more of the settings, because here you can set up the rhythm of the distance between the two. You can even set up the fixed step, or you can set up the numbers. You can just say that, okay, I just would like to have, I don't know, 12 of them and uniform step them, or I would like to have a specific value and then solve it. So if I change it here, let's say this should be, I don't know, 1 meter, say this one, and I click on redraw, the software solves it automatically. But only these. The rest are not changing by this setting. But for example, there is a connecting thing here, which is it will be the cripple stud. I will go for that later. There is a header. That's for the window. I can again double it, or I can set up something that is standing and set up, I don't know, triple copies of it. There is the saddle. It's at the bottom, again with the same settings. Jack studs. They are something that you can, again, you can just simply turn them on or off and change the properties, because some of these framework structures, they just don't have these. It really depends from country to country and from solution to solution. You can always enable and disable them. But if it's there, you use it. If it's not, then you just disable it. And as you can see, it automatically makes the changes for the connecting structure. So now if I would like to have a jack stud, I just use it and I change the properties. If I have a king stud, which is in this case this one here, I can set it up and set up a different cross section if it's stronger or something like that. And there's this cripple stud here, which is at the bottom and the top of this window, which is kind of a supportive or strengthening structure. If I don't want that, I can completely, again, turn it off. But if I want that, I can change the numbers or the distance, and I can say, okay, I should only have a little bit fewer than this here, and I would like to center the spacing, the spacing instead of the item, and in that case, this is what happens.
That's right.
There's the noggin, and actually that's what I mixed up with the cripple stud. The noggin here, this is the one that makes some kind of strengthening effect between the studs, and this is by default they are altering each other, so they're not in level, they're altering each other, but you can change that. And then of course you can set up their height within the structure. So if it's I don't know, at 1.5, I can click on redraw, and now this is what happens here.
Perfect. one thing to show us when you're done with showing this part is that this is actually part of a multi-layered wall, right?
Yeah.
So if you could go back to the layer selector and show where actually this layer is.
But well, the reason why it's within the layer with the insulation is that this is the layer in the compound wall settings with this indicator here. It's not because of that's the core layer. The core layer and this indicator can be two different things. This indicator is here. This is how you can set up. That's the so-called displayed layer. That's kind of the main layer of this setting. If I click here and I set it up as the display layer, it's not automatically becoming the core layer. That's a different thing. If I say that this is the displayed layer, then the structure automatically moves to that
Jumps
part.
to the next position.
It's automatically sent to that part.
I see.
So it's actually, this is one way to automatically shift the structure outside, but usually, of course, we put it in a proper layer with the same thickness, so it's automatically appearing right.
Thank you very much. I think it's now time to look at some of the questions that we have here. So one of the questions that we are looking at the questions first. There was a question asking if it's possible to handle our software similarly to another software product that the user is familiar with. There is some level of customization that you can do.
Yeah.
This particular product that he mentioned, we have a very special collaboration with, because you can bring in two-dimensional drawings, you can bring in blocks. But let's look at the interface. Just a couple of tips on how to customize the hotkeys. Maybe that would suffice.
Well, about the hotkeys, the hotkeys, you can say that, well, there is a command that I use, I like to use quite frequently like this, and this actually has a hotkey. And I use another software and I would like to make them similar.
Yes.
In that case, I just right-click here and I say I would like to set up a keyboard shortcut. And see, I click here and then now I change it to something else and say, okay, modify the keyboard shortcut, okay, and then it happens automatically. And from that point on this computer, this is the keyboard shortcut that I have. There is another way that you can do, is that if this command is so frequently used and it's kind of deeper into the setting, the menu system, and you would like to pin it to the important commands, you can do that again. Right-click here and say that you would like to add it to the quick access toolbars, which appears here. So if I click here, it comes to that part automatically. So you can actually pin complex menus over there, not just one command.
Perfect. There's another one, a bit more complex question here. I think it was about the wall layer. So in cavity walls, can you return the inner masonry wall 90 degrees to make the external masonry wall and form a check back to place a window or door frame for DPC weatherproofing? I think this is mainly about connecting the wall layers. If you set up the right functions, then they should meet. But if maybe this is not an answer to your question, then get in touch with us and we'll try to find.
Yeah, and there's one other thing. I think this kind of covers one part of the question, is that we do not cover that now because it's again modifying the walls, but it's more like a window property. If the window or the opening changes somehow the structure, you will find those settings in the setting of the opening. I'm not sure if that was about that, but sometimes that's also something that you would like to change, because you mentioned the window or door frame. So perhaps that's some sort of reveal setting that we are talking about.
Question, is there a function to give the walls a specific ID? Now this is a good question, because actually you can look for walls and other items in your quantity takeoff by their IDs.
Yeah.
So maybe there's a way to
There are
identify.
two things that we should talk about here. One is the ID that the software gives to the walls. That's something that you cannot change, and it's used in listings. When you list something like this, and you will find that there's a wall 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and there's an ID next to it. That's something that the software automatically generates. That's how it works. It calls number 200, number 238. That's how it works. And in that case, the list helps you to find a specific item. If you click here, you say, okay, let's just select by properties and then find it by ID, and I look into the Excel file, that was the ID, then find it for me. So that's how you can find it. The other way around, how you can handle specific IDs or any sort of tags for these items, is the BIM name. And the reason that why I suggest this, because this is surviving export. If you export your model into another software and you would like to collaborate with other designers, then the BIM name is kept. So if you name your walls, and this is also something that you can store into a style. So you can say that why my walls are I don't know, with a specific serial number or something, because this is how they manufacture this. It's having a certain serial number. I can use that, and I can even name them one by one.
So that's what
I just click here and I just change it. I'm not sure if for that purpose why it was asked. It's covering the question, but I think this is the two suggestions that I should talk about now.
Nevertheless, thank you very much for the questions. There's actually a question about handling three-dimensional elements, but we are going to show that in the show what is coming in 2 weeks about balustrades and railings. Meanwhile, I'm going to send some information about that out. Thank you very much for the questions. It kept this show very relevant and interesting, so I hope you enjoyed this brief look at the wall tools of ARCHLine. We see you next week when we're actually going to talk about how to work with external files in ARCHLine. So we talk about import, how to use data from other systems. We'll cover everything from CAD import, PDFs, JPEGs, even point clouds. So there's a lot to discuss. And after that, like I said, in 2 weeks, we'll talk about staircases, railings, where the three-dimensional tools will be dealt with in detail. I would like to thank you for your attention. See you next week.
Thank you. Goodbye.